dungeon here in the shop. I'm just prepping some timbers for the market garden shed build. So I got some posts cut up here, all the joinery's done on these. Tenon's done, all the mortises are in. And they're all labeled for where they need to go. So the rest of them are outside. And it's getting nice out now, so we'll probably move this operation outside soon. But follow along and I'll show you a little bit about what I'm doing here today. I just broke this 5x5 timber out of a longer length that I had. And this is going to be for the back lean-to area. It's almost like a little porch. And since this is going to be all sided, I didn't mind gouging it up, so I put some of my reference marks right in the face of this with the chisel. So these two let me know this is exterior corner, this is my reference face that I'm working off. Because it's important that you document what your reference face or what face you're working off with all your dimensions relative to, so you don't get screwed up when you start marking out joinery. And that's something that you'll learn for yourself when you screw it up. So, another thing I like to do is just kind of, if I'm marking out a post or something like that, I'll just stand it the way I know it's going to go. So right here, this is for my rear corner. The post looks short, but it's up on the foundation, up on a sill beam. So now I know that joinery, that tenon's going that way. And the tenon to go across this way. I'll just put some marks there. I know what they mean. Anything that makes sense to you. And then I go on the inside, and I know I need a 30-inch brace over here. So I'll just write 30 on the side of this. And then we can proceed to mark out what we need to. So before I broke this out of the big beam, I'd already rough cut an end. So made a new, got rid of the scrap that I had on the end. It was checked, so I cut that to length. And then I put in my tenon cut. And that way, once I have that in, this is for my 1.5 inch face, I can hook my tape on, and then before I cut it, mark out my finished length with the tenon as well. So it sounds complicated, but it's not once you start doing it. So we got that in place. We're gonna square, get all of our lines carried around this timber. Now for doing these, I have one combo square set for 1.5 inch and one for 3. And what that accounts for is everything's laid out with an 1.5 inch inset, and then my tenons are and mortises are all 1.5 inch. So that will allow for both those things to be marked out. And then we just carry these lines back to our finished cut. Roll this piece over. 3-inch mark. 1.5 inches. If it helps when you're starting out, mark your waist. So this is a tenon. Get the this, removing this, removing this. That's all coming out. We'll be left with that. So I have my saw set for 1.5 inches for my layout phase, and then this is whatever it is. Ideally, it'd be 1.5 inches. It's a 2-inch cut, but there might be slight variations on these timbers. So instead of resetting the saw every time, I just keep it cut at 1.5 inches for the depth, and come along with this silky saw and just finish off that cut. Use this to lay out now without cutting any more joinery. I already have a way to reference this. So it's a 30-inch brace that we're going for here. So I measured down 30, and what 30 inches means is that the overall dimensions laid out 30 and 30 on the top. With high 5, this is what the run of it. But for more information, you can do some reading up. Or the timber frame book or any of those books are great. And in the stock, I know that when I have a 3x5 coming in here, is what I have to account for my bracing. So I know that this diagonal run, the 3x5 actually run to 45. This needs a 7-inch housing. So 30, 23. Combination square. Run that one. These pencils I'm using are actually for marking out green lumber, and they work really good on being able to see them. Regular lead pencils don't show up as well, so actually, if you go to our kind of green end, there's almost a purplish hue to it if it's wet, but this is a fairly dry timber, but they do show up better. So now what I like to do now, I got my mortise laid out. Take my chisel, I like to just go along. This bottom end of the mortise will be cut square down to 90 degrees off this face. But since this brace is coming in at 45, this is going to have to be chopped at a 45 or greater to accept that. So I already start getting the angle there. I'm just going to remove the first about 1/8 inch of wood off this before I drill it. So now we got that chopped out. Gives us a nice clean area to reference all of our mark off of the drill. 1.5 inch drill bit. A just line this up with the sides of that chopped hole. I get it started, and I just check for square. So I'm checking this way, make sure we're square against it, and there as well. And once I know we are, I can start drilling. This has a depth stop, so I have this set for a 3-inch hole depth. And now we're just going down. We're trying to remove as much material as we can before we start chopping with the chisel. So now, I don't have to be as concerned with this being square to the lumber this way or plumb. What I'm more concerned with is side to side. Because if I drill a hole that's not plumb into this, then it's gonna take my my mortise will be offset. Now you have a problem with joinery later. We just go down, and this is where people you see with a boring machine, it's called, where they sit on it. In the old days, they'd sit on top of it and 2-hand crank, and it's like a drill press. But there's other ways to do this, other jigs you can do. This is kind of poor man's timber framing. And timber frame in its simplest form. These are guys that do production have a chain mortiser, and they take care of it all with that. But and on that last one, I'm not going full depth because I'm going to carry this mortise back on the 45, so it would actually take more material off than I need to. Now we're ready to do some chopping. Use the chisel. I like to start with the axe. Try to remove all that excess material as quickly and as efficiently as we can. So since I'm a righty, jump around here. Cleaning up the sides of the mortise here. I'll come back and do that then, but I like to clean up as I go. And we're using an 1.5-inch chisel. It's actually just under, it's like 1 inch and 7/16 probably. So we can know that if it's fitting tight, it's tighter than our joinery needs to be. Just clean it up. very versatile framing square. There's an 1.5 leg. Take that, and I know we're gonna increase our depth a little bit. So even though we had the depth stop there, still gonna hog this hole out a little bit. We'll just come along. I'm using the bevel side down. It's more like a plane in action. Now we can come from this direction. Chop it off the end. There we go. Once you clean out some of the chips, we'll be perfect on our depth. So I'm just reading the side here. And this is 14 inches on this inside leg, or if you're looking at this side, 16. So I'm looking to make sure it's at least 3 inches in depth. We'll just have to come along and clean this hole up a little bit, the mortise. Working on this, don't be afraid to switch sides, because you have a tendency to slope it towards either towards yourself or away, depending on what side you're working. So I'm just using this to kind of plane that side away, increase the size of my mortise so it's square. So you could set up a jig or something for doing this, but usually I'll just use my speed square. Put that there. There's a 45-degree angle on that side, and I'll ride the chisel down from the start and just see if I need to hog any more out. So. As long as this exceeds 45, we're good. A little bit of clearance is okay. Because all the weight's actually going to be on this bottom side of the mortise anyway. So it's good enough. Got weights down here. And I usually like to come in and clean up this bottom side. So I'm using a mortise chisel here, or a pig sticker as it's known as. Just cleaning up this end grain here. So usually as you chop down with the chisel, it has a tendency to start kicking into the mortise, so you're actually reducing the size of the mortise as you go. clean up my 45 as well. This is one of those things where a few extra minutes of just rechecking your work and cleaning things up is going to make things easier when you get to assembly. Cross cuts in on our tenon. It's now time to clean out these, rough out these tenons. So we're gonna remove this piece here, this piece. That's why we got lines all the way around. So I can watch this top. I'm hewing to the line, and I'm carrying that down. To minimize your tear, you might have to come in more to the end grain than across the grain. Choke up on the axe when you're doing some of the shorter work. Roll it over. Now you can see this line. Start hewing to this top line, and then I'll chase it down the side here. I'm gonna come back and clean this up with the chisel, so you don't have to try and get this perfect. But if you get sharp axe, you're comfortable doing it. It saves a lot of time. Chip on there, the more control it is. So I get this side to the line, this is to the line, and we're going to check this bottom edge. So just choke up on the axe and use it more as a plane or a chisel, a slick. So that's pretty close, about as close as I like to do for axe work. Come in with my framing chisel. And this is where I was talking about, just use the tools you have. I know this is just under 1.5 inches. So I'm gonna use this as a reference. This is my 1.5 inch face, check it with the chisel. And I already made that saw cut to 1.5 inches, so that's a reference as well. So I like to come over, and we're just planing this to the line. Marks we did earlier. That's the line. I'll work from this side. This is a fairly small timber, so it's all over the place on me. Kind of bounce along, but work with it. And then we look at this. That's our 1.5 inches. Just drag our chisel out and see if there's any shadows or gaps. It looks like there's a little hump right there. Clean that up. And then we can again use this chisel to check our tenon. So everything's laid out off this 1.5" side. So I'm more concerned with my dimensions carrying through from this side. 1.5" for our waist removed, the inset, and then we have 1.5" tenon. So now we're gonna check this. Make sure everything's in line. Looks like we gotta move a little bit on there. And then from there on, we're left with whatever we have. And we'll go down and do the same thing on the other end. So we got all of our, this is the easy one, there's only one mortise and 2 tenons. We got all of our joinery in. This is the last step I like to save. Come back with my jack plane and just like clean up all these edges and just put a little chamfer to them. So. Just makes them easier to handle later. You're not getting splinters, and they're gonna look nicer too. Yeah, I could set up the router and do it, but this is probably quicker. I don't have to listen to the rest of the router. If you're wondering what size plane, this is a number 5. I find for this stuff the number 5 to be probably the most versatile. So it's big enough that it can run along these big timbers. It's easy to handle. And then you can even hit that A10 to just assist in assembly. Later. Back on this end. Just put a little chamfer on it, guide it into our mortar later. And the one final step I like to do is I find my interior face. Just go to my interior face of this. And I'm just going to put a reference mark for myself. So the French timber framers and European framers have all these symbols and stuff that mean things to them, but I just go and I put what side it is. So north, I'll put an N. North. And it is the east corner as well. So any. That way we don't have to worry about this wearing off. I just did it with pencil or marker or anything, and I put it up top because it's just kind of outside of where your eyes need to be looking at it all the time. I mean, I think it's kind of cool to have, but it's kind of outside of it. So there we have it. There's a small post. Brace mortise. And then some tenons.